Hello, welcome back to Inside the Data on Inside the Birds. I'm Geoff Mosher here with our analytics and data specialist, Sam Finkel, as we continue our series looking at college prospects for the 2025 NFL Draft. And we go through them from an analytical standpoint. We measure, and I say we, I'm really talking about Sam here, and the scatter charts that he has produced for us that show prospects' athletic testing, their production, and on the chart where that measures up against their own class, the top first-round picks from the past 4 years, and then drafted tight ends over the past 4 years, just to give an idea of what we're looking at for this year's class. It's been a really educational series. Everybody seems to be giving us great feedback, Sam, so we really appreciate all your work on this.
Awesome.
This one's going to be fun because there's a Penn Stater that we're going to discuss, and you spent some time at Penn State as a coach. So we'll ask you a little bit about maybe why Penn State has lately become tight end U, or at least trying to knock Iowa off the throne. And who else is another tight end? It's Iowa and somebody else known for producing tight ends, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget who.
I feel like any other school is just fallen out of contention at this point.
It really is an Iowa Penn State thing. Yeah, it's like wrestling now.
That's exactly where my mind went too.
And also, this is important from an Eagles angle, as the future of Dallas Goedert, very uncertain. You know, we've reported on that. Team possibly will trade him if they can find the partner. We're not saying it's definitely going to happen, but, you know, the Eagles themselves have addressed the issue and talked about it as they try to assemble their team going forward. So, Sam, the one thing we know about the Eagles, right, they have a preference for tight ends. They like field stretchers, guys who get open, guys who catch the ball well. Do they always prioritize blocking with their tight ends? Clearly not. Grant Calcaterra, not much of a blocker. Zach Ertz was not much of a blocker. And to be honest with you, Dallas Goedert, coming out of South Dakota State, was not known for his blocking. He wasn't asked to do it. It was a nice, pleasant surprise for them to find out that he could do it. And that's why he elevated himself into being one of the best tight ends in football.
Sure. And I remember when we did our free agent series and we showed the Eagles tight end room, at least in pass blocking, and we were kind of shocked at how limited those numbers are, right? There was like 60 pass blocking attempts, I think, on the season for the Eagles tight end room. So.
All right, so we'll keep that in mind as we go through some of these prospects and say, hey, does this guy look like an Eagle or maybe not so much? So let's take a look at the tight ends, and I'm again, trying to blow up the screen for people watching on YouTube to be able to best understand it and see it. And hopefully this is big enough.
And wow, look at that. One name is
amazing. Just one name. Now, before you get into the name, I don't want to be accused of us being homers or anything from Penn State. Let us do what we do every show, and that is explain what the horizontal and vertical lines represent in this scatter chart.
Yeah, sure. So again, this specific chart is looking at the average first-round tight ends of the last 4 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it looks at their athleticism versus their production. And so these lines represent those averages for the last 4 years, and it creates 4 quadrants. In the top right, you have guys that are high producers and tested athletically very well, and those are your blue chips.
Mm-hmm.
To the left of that, you have guys that are great athletes, but didn't necessarily produce at that average level. Those are your hidden gems. In the bottom right, you have guys that produced very well, but didn't necessarily test crazy in their athleticism. And those are your safe guys or your good guys. And then you have where you don't want to be, which is the bottom left quadrant, which is people that did not produce very well and did not score very well in athletic testing. And typically, if you take them outside of, these average thresholds, they could be busts.
Right. So let's state the obvious here, right? Which may not for other scatter charts, but specifically for tight end. The obvious is one that Tyler Warren is the only guy in the upper right quadrant because he's an incredible athlete and he was Penn State's go-to target.
He was wide receiver 1 at tight end.
He was wide receiver 1. He was QB2. He was RB3. He played a lot of different positions. Anyone who watched Penn State knew that they used this guy like a Swiss Army knife. He did throw passes. So that's why he is the lone guy in the upper right quadrant. The second obvious thing, because people might say, man, there's nobody in the lower right safe area of all these good tight ends. Well, that's because that's a production thing. And we're talking about right now in this chart, tight ends who were drafted in the first round over the last 4 years. If you're not very productive as a tight end in college, you're probably not going in the first round. You have to, like, there aren't that many tight ends that go in the first round in general. The ones that are usually pass catcher 1 on their offense, or at least pass catcher 2.
So there were 3 tight ends in the last 4 years taken in the first round.
Let me try to guess them.
Yeah, guess. Let's see. Let's have it.
All right, Kyle Pitts.
Kyle Pitts is one of them.
McBride was not a first round pick, was he?
He was not a first round pick.
Ooh, okay. Kyle Pitts. Laporta was not first round. Oh man, I thought I was going to be good at this, Sam. Hold on.
I can tell you the years if you need that.
I don't really think that that's going to help me. Hawkinson?
Not last 4 years.
Oh man, I'm just thinking of like Iowa guys now and realizing that I don't think that.
Don't think Iowa. Neither of the other two.
Yeah,
are Iowa.
Yeah, it's not really Iowa. Probably somebody on the West. All right, you're gonna have to tell me. I can't remember.
Dalton Kincaid.
Of course. Buffalo.
And you're really not gonna like this one. You should know it. Georgia guy.
Oh, duh, Brock Bowers.
There you go.
I spent 10 more seconds thinking I would have got Bowers. Yeah, and those were guys who were all extraordinarily. In fact, Pitts was the main pass catcher at Florida his last year, and Kincaid certainly at Utah, I believe, was a beast. I mean, he caught a lot of balls at Utah.
Yeah, Pitts had a production score of 99, by the way.
Whew. Yeah, that's highly productive. So that just goes to show you when you're talking about first round picks, why only a guy like Tyler Warren. This is really no knock on this year's class, but a lot of these guys, we'll talk about them a few, are not considered the number 1 or number 2 pass catcher on their team, but they're still very good players.
Typically, tight ends aren't, so it's pretty rare you see that.
Right.
So that's I think that's worth mentioning.
Sure. So from an Eagles standpoint, we'll get into some of these names in a second, but I know you like to put the same chart with Eagles names in it. Look at Dallas Goedert there. Very good athlete. And again, I think he was pass catcher 1 at South Dakota State, which explains why he gets pretty close to the production line there.
Yep, absolutely.
Go ahead. Good.
No, I was just going to say that would make sense. I mean, it's so hard because it's not one of the, major schools that you typically see. So it's hard to evaluate production from that lens too, because the competition's different. You just face completely different circumstances, really.
Right. Now, again, when you compare these guys, the Eagles guys, to the first rounders, this is why Harrison Bryant looks in this lens in the bust category. But remember, he's not that far from the production line, correct? And he was the Mackey Award winner coming out of Central Florida, UCF? No, FAU, sorry. FAU, he went over 1,000 yards. I think he had 16 touchdowns. He doesn't test very well athletically, but production, pretty good there.
Yeah, none of these guys were first rounders, so it probably is not fair to compare them yet. It's just interesting to see.
Absolutely. In fact, Goddard was a second round pick many years ago, and obviously he's turned into a blue chip player for the Eagles.
Oh, just you wait till you see the top 100 line, and you'll see where he fits.
I can't wait for that. All right, so we'll move on. We'll talk about some of these other guys in a second. Let's move on to a more realistic comparison, because I think this year only Tyler Warren and probably Loveland from Michigan, who appears here on the right side now in the save category, will be first round picks. Maybe there's a guy who sneaks in there like a Mason Taylor or Fannin Jr., but I think mostly you're looking at 2 definite first round picks and then a bunch of guys who are going to go in round 2 and round 3.
Yep. 100% agree. There'll be usually a run on tight ends around the second or third round. All
right, and that makes this scatter chart really important. The purple lines, Sam, represent what?
So this is the top 100 drafted in the last 4 years.
All right.
So basically the first 3 rounds.
Right. All right. And that's a wider lens and a more realistic look because, again, most of the tight ends that we're talking about are going to go in the second or third round. So you see a guy like Harold Fannin Jr. I always forget what school he is.
Bowling Green.
He's a Bowling Green guy. Right. Which, by the way, the Eagles' new quarterbacks coach is Scott Leffler, who was the Bowling Green head coach. Correct?
That is correct.
All right.
Very interesting.
All right. So he becomes he falls into the safe category. He's right under the athleticism mark, but way over the production mark.
He's like a hop, skip, and a jump away from being in that blue chip category.
Right. And as far as production, you see Arande Getz in the second from
Syracuse.
Say it again.
Syracuse,
right. He's very productive, just falls a little bit short of athletic testing. But let's shift this focus back to the Eagles and what we said. The Eagles will sacrifice, quote unquote, production, right, to get a guy that they think can be a really good athlete at that position. Look at the names of the guys here who are above average athletic testing when you compare them to first, second, and third rounders over the last 4 years. Any names that jump out to you there?
Yeah, actually, I think all of them do. So I think they're all very interesting prospects. Obviously, Mason Taylor, very interesting. He's very close to being also in that blue chip category. Same with Terrence Ferguson. Arroyo, incredible athlete, same athletic level, almost looks like it's same as Warren, maybe a little bit higher. Jalen Conyers from Texas Tech. I know that there was some love for him in some of the comments we got. And I think he kind of fits the bill as well. Didn't necessarily produce at the level necessary here, but very talented athlete. And then CJ, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Dupre from Alabama.
So I think, Sam, that this little cluster here, Conyers, Arroyo, Ferguson, Taylor, that to me, it's like I have that in my crosshairs, man. I'm really looking at that for the Eagles. We know Warren's going to be gone. Loveland will probably be gone, but Fannin might be there. But again, if we're really talking about from an Eagles lens, right, and prioritizing the athleticism standpoint and the testing, then you look at this cluster, and to me, you might feel the same way or differently. I feel like these guys are likely to be a little higher on their board than maybe even a Fannin.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with any of those four guys.
Right.
I think that this is the time to take them, especially if you can get them in the third round as opposed to the second. And you probably are fine with taking any of those guys.
Right. Now, a couple of things that also stand out about these three in particular, Arroyo, Ferguson, and Taylor, right? They're above the athletic line, short of the production line. But again, these guys were not pass catcher one on their respective offenses. In some cases, not even pass catcher two. Mason Taylor has really smooth movement, catches the ball really well. He went to LSU.
Yep.
They throw to the ball wide receivers every year. Ferguson, Oregon. We've seen that Oregon offense. I mean, Tez Johnson, right? They got a running back who catches passes. They have another wide receiver who catches a lot of passes. And Greg Cosell made a note to us that Arroyo, who Miami kid, I believe.
Yes.
Is an excellent field stretcher, excellent vertical threat, but also a guy who played second fiddle to, I guess, what was the record-setting guy that? Restrepo? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas, again, Warren's here because he is the target. Harold Fannin on Bowling Green is the target. Loveland, he's the target on a passing game that was just abysmal last year. But these guys could easily, if they were just targeted more, right, probably move to this section pretty quickly.
So I think that's important. And I think Arroyo in particular is a guy that I think I might be really high on, maybe more than anyone else. And the reason why is if you look at his receptions in the past 3 years, he had 41 receptions as opposed to Tyler Warren who had 148 or Ferguson who had 117. Right. So he had one of the lowest receptions. The only one who had less than him, and I think it was only one, it was Jackson Halls out of Georgia Tech. But he had almost 200 more yards on 3 more catches. He had the highest yards per reception at 16.27 and 7 touchdowns on 41 receptions.
Wow. So, I was trying to think of a good comp, like a really good NFL tight end who didn't catch a lot of passes or as much, wasn't as productive in college because he just was with a bunch of guys who are like wide receivers who were catching the ball more than him. I'm sure there's one out there. And by the end of the show, maybe I'll think of one. I don't know. Like, where did Jason Witten go to school? I forget. Did he go to Oklahoma?
Sounds right.
No, Tennessee. Jason Witten went to Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
I think that year they had a bunch of decent. Well, I mean, he was a second round pick, so it's not like he was a sleeper. I'm pretty sure. But he wound up catching a truckload of passes in the NFL, and Hall of Fame type guy. So there, you see a lot of that. Laporta at tight end. He probably was targeted quite a bit because they always do. But it's not like I remember Laporta ripping it up week after week after week. He was pretty good, but Kittle, same thing with Kittle. He wasn't the first or a second round pick.
Right.
So sometimes these guys just play second fiddle, and then they get to the NFL, and their athleticism translates, and they become really reliable targets.
Yeah, he's a guy that I feel like can develop into the next superstar of tight ends.
Arroyo.
Yeah, I feel like you need to develop him. There's a lot that you need to develop and get him more involved in the passing game, but he's a guy I'm very excited about.
Well, he's 6'5", 250, which is really nice size there. I'm trying to think if there's a 40. I don't know if he ran the 40 or not. I mean, that for a tight end, that's really not as important, but he's a good route runner, and he obviously played with Cam Ward, right? So he probably has a good idea on how to play with mobile quarterbacks and sit down in zones, which is what tight ends really have to do, or have their break off routes for scrambling and things like that. So yeah, I agree with you. I think Arroyo is a guy that really you should put the red circle around and say, if this guy gets into the right system with a nice quarterback, he could really take off.
Yep. And I don't think that's a particularly hot take, by the way. It's just he's consensus exciting guy. Did not run the 40, by the way. 22 reps on bench press, though.
Well, that's pretty good. Yeah. I mean, if this guy can block at 250 with that kind of strength, and you're looking at a wide tight end who can block and stretch the field, well, then you've got like a Dallas Goedert replacement right there.
There you go.
All right. So as we now look again, these are top 100 picks. So first 3 rounds. It's the same scatter chart as last one, just with Eagles now tight ends involved. Kylen Granson getting closer to the mark.
Yeah, I mean, Kylen Granson was an exciting prospect at the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, Harrison Bryant, we talked about it. Look how much more his production now matters when you open it up to the top 3 rounds. Because remember, Harrison Bryant was a 4th round pick of the Cleveland Browns. Right? Browns? Yeah, Browns.
Granson? Or are you talking about Harrison Bryant?
Harrison Bryant.
Oh, yeah, Harrison Bryant, yes.
Yeah, I mean, look at that, where the production, it puts him in the safe zone now. It tells you, hey, if you're taking Harrison Bryant among anybody who was drafted in the first 3 rounds of the last 4 years, you're doing all right from a production standpoint. You're not getting the greatest athlete, but you're getting a guy who outproduced a lot of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, he won the Mackey. He's a guy that obviously can produce. But, the athleticism is just not necessarily where you'd want it to be in that range.
Yeah, and he's sort of the rare, like he's the exception to the rule, right? Because we talked about how the Eagles do value athletic testing. And look, Calcaterra a lot closer to the mark. Granson, good athlete. They had a 4 on Granson coming out of
SMU.
SMU, thank you. Man, my mind is like not a sieve today. Or no, it is a sieve. Yeah, but look how much when you, as a 4th rounder, if that's the grade they had on him, and these are comparing him to guys who went in the first 3 rounds, he's much closer to the mark.
Right, and he was taken in the? He was taken 4th round.
4th round pick of the Colts. Yeah,
127.
Right, and as I understand it, the Eagles also had a 4th rounder on him. All right, now this opens it up again. Sam, I'll have you explain it. What does the red lines mean?
Red lines is everybody that has been drafted in the last 4 years. So it's basically all the tight ends represented here.
And now look how many guys fall under the blue chip and safe category. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys.
You know what's interesting?
Mm-hmm.
That cluster that we were talking about. Look where they fall here.
Yep. That cluster. Arroyo, now a blue chipper. Ferguson, a blue chipper. Mason Taylor, a blue chipper. Conyers, much closer. All right. Fannin still out there. So, I mean, this show, if the Eagles go with any one of these guys anywhere in the draft, right, anywhere, then they're getting a better than the last 4-year average drafted tight end.
Absolutely.
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
Yes, theoretically. We got to throw that in there. All right. Any of these guys, Sam, that don't cut it that you particularly like or think may have a better chance of success than another?
I feel like in this particular instance, it does a pretty good job of capturing the guys that I like.
Okay.
I don't dislike necessarily the guys in the bottom left, but
Mhm.
I do think it is kind of fair based on what I've watched.
All right, as we move to the final chart and put the Eagles in there, hey, look, you get Granson on the side you want to be on, Goddard on the side you want to be on, Bryant you on the side you want to be on, and Calcaterra certainly fits the mold athletically. He just again at Oklahoma, and SMU, he had the concussions issue, so I think he had retired for a year.
Yeah, he did.
That's just not going to be there, and the size, right? You said size influence. He's not the biggest guy in the world.
Yeah. And I think it's not unfair to have him close to that, gem area. So
All right. Well, look, I think that if you're an Eagle fan in particular and you expect the Eagles to address tight end, and by the way, even if Dallas Goedert stays, it would be his last year. You want to rebuild this position the way they did when they took Goddard in the second round, even with Zach Ertz under contract. So I don't think the Goddard situation, whether he stays or goes, is actually going to influence their draft plans. I would expect them to target a tight end if the guy is there in whatever round they're picking. And I think these charts show you that there's some pretty good prospects. Would you
yeah, I
agree?
think this is a really good tight end draft class. And you can't go wrong with, I think, the first top 7 guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see how many of them wind up going in the first 2 rounds. I think probably more so than usual. I think those guys that we talked about in the cluster look really ripe for the second round, early third.
Yep, 100% agree.
All right, great stuff. All right, so that's tight ends, and in the next episode, we'll move on to a different portion of the offense. Maybe the offensive line. We could do quarterbacks. We'll let you know when we start the show. All right, that is it. That is it for Inside the Data with Sam Finkel. For Sam Finkel, I'm Geoff Mosher. We thank you all for watching.